Welcome to Shovel Talk, a podcast for economic developers. From your friends at the Golden Shovel Agency.
Welcome, Shovelheads. Darren Varley back with another episode of Shovel Talk. Really excited for this one. I'm going to chat with a great Golden Shovel client, actually a client that I manage, Brian Rademacher from the City of Ormond Beach, Florida. He has shepherded the city through a process for a 500-acre mixed-use master plan called Ormond Crossings. So Bethany Quinn sat down with Brian to talk a little bit about that. Economic development is a puzzle, Brian says, and he has connected the pieces. Take it away, Bethany.
Well, hello, everyone. I am so excited to be spending time today with Brian Rademacher, who is the Director of Economic Development for the City of Ormond Beach in Florida. Many of you have probably visited that area on vacation, and Brian's role obviously is to make sure that it's significantly more than a vacation destination, but obviously a great place for business. So thank you for being with us today, Brian.
Great. Thanks for having me. It's a joy to be here.
So I know that you have been a client of Golden Shovel for a while. And one of the things that you have done a great job is promoting your individual community, but also working with regional organizations. So you have a unique perspective, I think, on that balance between promoting Ormond Beach specifically, but then also working with partners and colleagues. Would you mind telling people a little bit about that?
Sure. I mean, my interest in that really dates back to my first job in economic development. I started out in this profession as the economic development coordinator for a regional metropolitan planning organization that was in charge of updating at the time, the 2040 comprehensive plan. And so my team's objective was to engage the county and local economic developers to participate in the comprehensive planning process to make sure that the plan was addressing economic development needs, both at a regional level and at a local level. And then additionally, our team had a toolbox of economic development tools and data that we then also provided to the local economic development professionals to help them with their jobs. Because in many instances at the local level, the budgets are thin. So our ability to have an economic impact data tool, labor force statistics, CoStar as a real estate platform, and other programs available to help them do analysis and reach out to companies was a big step. And through that experience, I recognized the integral component of regional economic development and how that trickles down to the local economic developers. And then, of course, how that local economic development really does feed back up into regional efforts for marketing and attraction, as well as retention and expansion of existing businesses. One of the things that, as we talked about, giving back, or, after having been in the profession for so long, giving back to the community, and you had mentioned, recognizing the importance and value of being engaged and involved at the regional level and with other agencies. I think at every level, there's always a level to get involved, whether it's at the local level with the chamber. I think most states have state economic development organizations that we could be a part of, and even regional organizations. And I think from an educational standpoint, the resources, whether or not anyone wants to, try to achieve a certification in economic development, I think that the education that's out there for economic developers, recognizing that, this is a profession that, we choose to be in, just like anyone chooses to be a doctor or someone chooses to be a lawyer. We choose to be economic developers in many instances. And there's a lot of joy and value in nobleness in that pursuit. And so I think to be able to, again, sort of lean into all of the resources and other people that are in this profession through conferences is always worthwhile, and something that should be sort of top priority for anyone in our field, so that you're always learning and always expanding that network, because you never know what great opportunities or insights are going to happen by doing those things.
Well, I think something you said there is obviously so important, and that's the fact that there has to be this dialogue between the local economic developer and whether that's at the state level or a county or regional organization level, to make sure that the people with more of the budget and the resources have a better understanding of what local communities actually need. That's really, really a good point. And what are your recommendations, I guess, for economic developers who are working for an individual community on how they can partner in a way that's more impactful?
Always, you definitely the adage of, link and leverage networks and assets, both at the local level, but of course, regionally, getting involved. Most areas now have regional economic development organizations that have one or more charges for the economic development strategy for that area. So getting involved with the organization at either a practitioner level, if they have one, or at a board level, so as to be at the table, being a part of those conversations on what the economic development strategy is going to be, talking about what the local entity, the local unit of government has to offer when it comes to the marketing and attraction efforts, so as to, fully make sure the region's practitioners are aware of the assets of that community, so that they can, when they're bringing the region to foreign direct investors or to companies that are, looking into the state, that they'll know, hey, this company looks like it'll be a good fit for this community over here or these communities. So definitely getting involved, I think at regional level and at the state level, definitely has value, and just finding ways to help and or participate in any of those events, whether it be trade shows, familiarization tours that they may be having with site selectors, and also providing, I think, most importantly, the assets or benefits that the community has to offer, the sites that it has, just really being transparent on what the community can offer for efforts when it comes to either expansion of companies, but also attraction and relocations of companies coming into the community.
Yeah, and that's definitely a good point when it comes to having those conversations as well. I know one of the things that I hear a lot of times from local economic developers is that, even when they do partner with the state or regional level, they sometimes struggle to articulate why their community is the right fit for a particular type of business when you're talking about attraction efforts, right? Because, every community can't be everything to everyone. So it's important to focus. How have you worked to differentiate Ormond Beach as far as making sure that at the state or regional level, people think of your community for specific industries?
Yeah, one of the critical components of our economic development department was to make sure that we have always an updated economic development strategic plan. And we recently did an update of ours 2 years ago, but really that provides for us the roadmap, which identifies, in particular, what I always think about are our industry clusters, identifying what are the industries that we currently have in the community so we can continually nurture and grow our retention and expansion program. But then how does our community fit within the regional and state-based industry clusters so that we can better hone our pitch when it comes to marketing companies to our region, whether we're doing it or working with our regional partners to do that. And then this year or last year, the other component that was integral was doing a marketing strategy or a blueprint strategy, which we were able to use Golden Shovel for, which helped us better define what our marketing strategy was going to be, both locally to promote the value and benefit of economic development to our community and to our business community, but then also how do we craft messages so that we can gain better traction and greater visibility through social networks as well as advertised placements to let people know that Ormond Beach is a great community, or I guess as our tagline is, we're the Central Florida's preferred address for your business and your lifestyle. So those
Exactly.
two,
You're going to want to
yeah,
live there and work there. I love it.
that's right. Yep. Because, typically it's not uncommon for families or business owners to be vacationing in our region, and they'll be in Ormond Beach, and they're like, if I have to work somewhere, why not here? And I've had a couple instances where they'll reach out to me while they're on vacation, and we have some good conversations. So starts with the lifestyle into the business address, but either way, it certainly does. Each lends itself to one another.
That's awesome. I love that you have stories of people reaching out to you while they're on vacation. So that is definitely the sign of a true entrepreneur, right? If you're sitting at the beach and all you can do is think about your business ideas and you're available to chat with them. So that's perfect.
That's right. Well, and it's funny. An aside to that is, as an economic developer, I'd be interested to know how many other listeners are the same way. But whenever I go on vacation, it's always like a site selection tour, right? I go into cities or on vacation, and I'm always more interested to learn more about how the city was developed, where the industries are, who are the industries, where's the expansion happening. It's always never a dull day.
Yeah, exactly. No, I know. I think that's the curse of the trade is that you can't really turn your mind off. You're always kind of evaluating communities, which also can be really fun.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, I do want to talk more about your background because you have a lot of diverse experiences that I think could be really helpful for our listeners to learn from. But before I do, I wanted to ask you, I know there's a lot of really good things happening in Ormond Beach lately. What is a project or a success story you're most proud of that you'd want to share with our listeners?
We have a planned development in Ormond Beach called Ormond Crossings. It is a 3,000 acre mixed use development in the northwest portion of our city. It was right on the I-95 and US Highway 1. It's a development that has been kind of on the books, if you will, or growing for the last 20 years. In 2004, the land was annexed into the city, and the city worked with the private landowner to assemble the land, entitle it, zone it, and prepare sort of a conceptual master plan and a development agreement that runs with the land. And recently, in December of 23, the Ormond Crossings development was purchased by a developer who is now in earnest beginning to build it out. There are three major components to Ormond Crossings. The first, and perhaps from the economic development perspective, most important, is the Commerce Park, which is 500 acres, entitled for up to 2 million square feet of office, light industrial, and flex space. And then on the west side of I-95, there's a lifestyle town center, which will provide for up to over 800,000 square feet of retail and office space and mixed use multifamily development. And then to the west of that is about 2,500 residential units. So definitely a big development that will unravel over the next 5 to 10 years, most likely 10 years. But really excited about that because, it's been something that the city has been talking about and in the region, really, particularly on the Commerce Park side, and to now finally be working with the developer closely to see that come to fruition is very exciting. And the excitement that it's generating and the interest as well is very palpable and something that will be fun to work with the companies we're going to see moving into that business park.
Oh, absolutely. And I remember you and I chatting a couple of years ago, and this was something that was on your radar, the need to continue to get more light industrial and office space available in Ormond Beach. So it's always really fun to touch base and see how your efforts have paid off in that way. So definitely congratulations on that project. Now, one of the things I wanted to talk about with your background is actually incredibly relevant to Ormond Crossings. So for those who have not stalked Brian's LinkedIn profile, as I have, and had the pleasure of having previous conversations with him, you may not realize that he has some experience in transportation. So you worked on a transportation initiative in Baltimore. You also worked for the Department of Transportation in Illinois. And I know that you were able to secure or work with your colleagues and partners to secure FDOT money to help with that I-95 interchange that definitely ties into the park. So that's huge and something that a lot of economic developers don't know how to do. So could you please give some insight into how that transpired and maybe some recommendations for how other economic developers could better leverage their own state's Department of Transportation resources?
Yeah, transportation, kind of the three-legged stool of development, right? There's economic development planning and then transportation, which inevitably lead economic developers to be pegged as planners or transportation engineers, which, we always say we're jacks of all trades, but masters of none. Definitely the experience in working in transportation, it's important to look at the transportation network of a community or a region and best assess how does development complement that network and or can it lend itself to work more efficiently. And I think where Ormond Crossings is, as I've said, it and I-95 bifurcates right down the middle of it, where you have the Commerce Park on the east side and then the rest of the development on the west side. And that interchange in particular is still the original interchange from when I-95 was constructed. And so it certainly lacked efficiency and was beginning to cause, just a lot of accidents and confusion for people coming on and off I-95. And as a gateway into the city and or into Volusia County, it was something that needed to be fixed. And so, working closely with our transportation consultants and our city engineering staff, as well as with our elected officials, we were able to advocate to advance the funding for the design and engineering of the project. Kind of going back to my metropolitan planning days, the I-95 interchange project itself was already within the transportation planning organization's master plan, but it was just a matter of advocating for getting the funding sooner rather than later. And I think that's kind of an important component of economic development, is being an advocate for projects that will help advance economic development. And so in this instance, it was not being shy of reaching out to our state representatives in Tallahassee for us and locally with our MPO to advocate for and discuss why it's important that we fund this project now and just continue to link and leverage those networks to make that happen. And it actually did. So I think that the takeaway there is to, if there are ways to promote economic development projects related to transportation, to then not be shy again about bringing together a group of like-minded individuals who will advocate together for funding, for planning exercises, or for any other type of design that needs to be done, and coming at it from the economic development perspective.
Yeah, and so there's a couple of things that you mentioned when telling that story that I just want to call out to people, because I know there's a lot of economic developers that are new to the industry that listen to our podcast and get our resources. And one of those is you talked about the fact that this was in the master plan. So a lot of people don't realize that the funding for major transportation projects does actually take, years to come through. And it's really important to make sure that you have good relationships with people at all stages so that you can bring things to their attention if your community is not already on the radar. And then the other thing, obviously, is I appreciate how you mentioned that you involved a lot of different people to help put the plug in to advocate for this project. It's so important to mention that, just because ultimately, as an economic developer, you can only do so much, right? And there are sometimes the cases of the squeaky wheel gets the grease, right? So tapping into your local politicians and partners, I think, was a really good point that you made.
Yeah, definitely. Again, coming back to, and again, not just a local effort, right? It was recognizing that there are many stakeholders involved that would, I wouldn't say benefit from it, but I think ultimately saw the value that it will add to our community and to the region if we can do this now again rather than later.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I mean, a $340 million investment, that's a big deal. So good job. That's really, really exciting. And obviously, I think that'll help with the community buy-in for the project holistically as well, because you're demonstrating an even bigger benefit to everyone with
And
those changes.
yeah, it definitely does help too with all of the development. Again, we're, kind of the area right now in the city where we're seeing a bulk of development, new development, particularly with Ormond Crossings. That new interchange will be a significant benefit to that area as we see it build out over the next 10 years.
Yeah, definitely important for that long-term perspective. So another thing that you have that's really interesting in your background, speaking of long-term perspectives, is that you co-founded a housing nonprofit with a focus on building safe, affordable housing in developing countries. Housing policy is something that pretty much every community is struggling with in some capacity, trying to figure out uh, not just, can we build it, but what type of housing should we build? How do we get community buy-in? How do we build them faster and more efficiently in order to support our workforce needs? Regardless of what community I speak with, this is definitely a major problem. And I'm kind of curious if your work in developing countries gave you any ideas as far as maybe things that we could do differently here in the US. Is there anything we could learn from what other countries are doing to help us increase our housing supply?
What was interesting about that project was really looking at alternative solutions for housing and not going with the traditional, sticks and bricks that can be implemented traditionally internationally, because I mean, it does tend to be a cheaper solution, but when faced with natural disasters, not so much, especially when then you have to recover and rebuild all over. And so the solution there was really, very early on before it was well popularized, was the use of shipping containers to provide a housing solution, even a very simple housing solution that could withstand many of the natural disasters seen by developing countries, and particularly in the islands. And I think what I was fascinated as we continued to discover what other innovations were being implemented was just the variety of solutions that were being innovated or being looked at and tried in the different communities all over the world, to suggest that, maybe an open source initiative to identify solutions and give them a shot would be worthwhile effort in order to see what are other ways in which we can provide housing. And, not necessarily out of the reach here in the United States either is, what are some of those practical solutions? There's a couple of companies even here locally that are introducing the concept of shipping containers to provide housing as affordable housing or workforce housing, and can be done in a way that is both tasteful but also economical.
It's interesting because people have this idea of what a container home will look like, and I've seen them and they can look quite lovely. I mean, it doesn't look like a shipping container got put in your yard. So I think there's definitely a need to educate people on what they could be.
Yeah, I think you can just do internet searches for it, and I'm pretty sure that the Home Network or TLC has done several shows about the use of shipping containers. And of course, it's not typically never just one. You can bring some of them together and really do some really cool configurations with it. But again, to what I always like to do is kind of line up the sheets and show, what are the cost benefits and the savings for that, and even the opportunity to take the house and go completely off grid with it, which, is another way to look at how to, not only for cost savings, but then again, as we, with all of the intense weather we can face, particularly here in Florida, could always be a positive solution.
Hmm. Yeah. Do you have any insight into how that worked with your community in regards to basically the permitting process and the planning regulations? I know some communities have wanted to implement some creative solutions and face challenges there. Do you have any ideas on how to navigate that?
No, I don't.
Okay. Edit this part out, Victor.
Yes. I don't know if that one will fly. No, sorry. Next
Yeah.
question.
Next question. No problem. All right. Well, Brian, obviously, we've talked about transportation. We've talked about an initiative with Ormond Crossings that was years in the making. We've talked about housing policy. None of these are efforts that happen with a snap of the fingers or even in a single year term. It's just not possible. They take time to build momentum and energy around them. And really that starts with strategic planning. And I know that's actually one of the aspects of your job that you really enjoy. So could you share with our listeners your approach to strategic planning and some of the benefits that you've seen come out of it?
Absolutely. Actually, when I started my education towards my certification as an economic developer, I went through the Oklahoma University Economic Development Institute, and strategic planning was one of the first classes that I took, and was actually honored to have two amazing teachers or economic development professionals teach those. The first half of the class was taught by Tim Chase, who gave an overview and provided us sort of the how to do strategic planning for economic development, which kind of really set a good foundation for how to tackle it moving forward and work with stakeholders and the different components that you're going to want to have in a strategic plan. And then the second half was with Ed Morris, who introduced this notion of strategic doing, which is a process that is heavily focused on civic engagement and sort of creating quick turn action plans to make sure that the strategic plan just doesn't sit on the shelf, but that it actually results in implementation. And so having learned those early on, kind of embraced the process as something you always have as a component of my strategic planning. And it's really important because, as mentioned earlier, the strategic plan really does set the mission and the vision for economic development in particular for a community. And it really sets the guidelines for how is this community going to grow, where does it want to grow, and really what does it want to achieve over 3 years or 5 years. And that doesn't just happen by looking at data and then putting it together in a document, but really, requires bringing together the business community in focus groups to talk about some of the issues the community is facing and, what it really wants to focus on. And also doing, focus groups and one-on-ones with the existing businesses and larger employers in the area to really set the framework for that plan. And it's a lot of fun. I really enjoy doing it. Not only creating the plan, but then when it's done, that you have a set of goals and objectives that can then be implemented over the course of the 5 years. Because it's really rewarding to sit back after a 3-year plan or a 5-year plan and say, man, look at everything we've accomplished. What's next? And it's not always a bed of roses. Sometimes things don't get accomplished. And that's the opportunity to say, okay, what didn't work or what do we need to do differently here, which then just helps shift the paradigm a little bit for what a community is trying to achieve.
Being able to reflect like that is certainly important. Now, obviously, you talk about the strategic plan as being 3 to 5 years, which is pretty standard in the economic development industry. I'm curious, when you pick something as a strategic doing that you mentioned earlier, how quickly do you try to get that item done? It sounded like that was like a shorter step in the process to achieving your longer goal.
Yeah, well, it's always kind of shadow boxing. So if the objective or the goal itself is multi-year, you just kind of break it down into small bites, kind of like how to eat the elephant one bite at a time. So the small bites are, those incremental steps towards the ultimate goal. And that's kind of where the strategic doing fits into the picture, because it can really help identify what's going to be done, say, over the next 90 days or 180 days. But then also that recognizing that it's not something that is done alone, but that, again, we work with our strategic partners. And if we're working with a local government, or as in local government, you work with your other departments to help realize those goals. So it's just making sure that there's always a little action plan involved, and that, that as the economic developer, we're always kind of moving that ball forward for that objective.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And basically, the elephant analogy is a good one, because strategic plans, I mean, they're weighty. The documents themselves are very long, and there's so much that has to be achieved, that I think your point about doing one small step at a time probably is one of the reasons why your strategic planning has been so effective.
Well, I think it's always important, and speaking to local economic developers, is with the strategic plan, it's always important with whoever's helping to put that together, is to make sure that the objectives are always very clear, and that that it's implementable, right? To make sure that if there are any recommendations, that there's sort of guidelines or guidance on how is that going to get funded, who's going to take the lead, and who are the other resources or agencies or stakeholders, again, that are going to help implement that, to really provide that clarity so that there is a sense of direction moving forward. And of course, always funding, because I think one of the hurdles that can halt strategic planning is not having enough, having proper funding for implementing some strategies that ultimately require financing.
Yes, that is the magic word that definitely can throw wrenches in things.
Yes, it can.
So one of the things that we are talking about next, as I'm sure you're aware, we have different educational campaigns and resources that we put out regularly. And one of those that's coming up is on succession planning and leadership changes within organizations, because that's a big issue right now. You have been an economic developer for a while, and you've had multiple leadership positions. Do you have any recommendations that you could share for what you would have really appreciated as a new leader coming into an organization?
Something I have always appreciated, and I think have been blessed to have through my tenure in this profession, is some amazing mentors. When I started with the Metropolitan Planning Organization in the Chicagoland region, my boss was perhaps my greatest mentor, who really wanted to help me succeed and be successful in economic development, and really did a great job of teaching me the ropes and helping me get connected to the people that would continue to educate me. And I think just progressively, as I then continued to move up in this profession and experience the different roles that I have, in every instance, I've always had a mentor. And I think that's always important, to have somebody that you can confide in, that is looking out for your best interests, not so much in terms of moving up the ladder, but looking at your improvement from a professional and personal perspective, to be successful, and to be successful and well balanced in the profession. So that's something that I think is really important, that I've been blessed with. And I would always encourage economic developers to make sure that they have one, or seek one out, whether that's within their organization or that's on their board. And then I think, just being so long in the profession now, I am now beginning to look for ways to serve as a mentor, or to provide advice and guidance to those entering into the field, recognizing that there's a lot of information and knowledge to share, and just wanting to be able to pass that down so that others can benefit from it.
So everyone heard that. If you have a question and would like some guidance, feel free to contact Brian through LinkedIn.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for that. I really appreciate it. And I think that was so much of our conversation was around sharing your insights with other people. As I mentioned, a lot of new economic developers listen, and the way that you're able to talk about tying in local economic development with that larger whole, whether it's regional or state organizations or transportation organizations, I think is really valuable. So I appreciate you sharing your thoughts. And now we have reached a point where we are going to do our quick shovel toss game. So this is a game where I'm going to ask you a bunch of random questions that you have not been prepped for at all, and we're going to see how quickly you can answer them.
It's just like a Rorschach test.
Yeah, I know. Are you ready?
Yeah, all right.
We'll see how fast you are on your feet, because you can't have any prep for this to work. All right, ready,
All right.
set, go. What was your first car?
It was an Oldsmobile.
Favorite dessert?
Ice cream.
If you could be a superhero, who would you be?
Batman.
Favorite vacation destination?
Sanibel Island, right here, great state of Florida.
Top of your bucket list?
Yeah, just because of a recent vacation hiking rim to rim in the Grand Canyon.
Your go-to song or band?
Oh, my go-to band is U2.
Something you can't live without?
Air.
What you wish you would have known when you what you wish you would have known when you started your career?
Everything there was to actually know, and now even 10 years later, realizing I still don't really know everything I should need to know.
Fair point. And what do you want to be remembered for?
For having given back and helped supporting my community.
Oh, that was awesome. You got to 1 minute and 21 seconds, which our average is 1:30. So good job.
Oh, my pleasure. I think it was the air question is what saved me some time there.
Yeah, air was a good answer. I think that's definitely true. You cannot live without it. Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Bethany and Brian. In Golden Shovel news, we do have a new hire, Trey Akins, coming on board as a new gatekeeper representative and going to take over a handful of Golden Shovel clients. He brings a extensive background in economic development. We are super excited for him to join the team. So welcome aboard, Trey, and a lot of you possibly listening to this will be getting Trey as your new gatekeeper representative. We are creeping up towards the holidays, and you know what that means. That means we're getting close to the Golden Shovel 2024 year in review and sneak peek to 2025. This is a podcast that we get a lot of engagement on, so we're looking forward to putting that together. We may have another one sprinkled in before the end of the year, but stay tuned for our year in review coming up soon. We'll be back, like I said, very soon with another episode of Shovel Talk. I am Darren Varley, and thank you for joining us.